I'm Steve Suhr, and my full name is Stephen Cameron Suhr. My wife, Georgianne, and I have 3 children. One son lives with us in San Jose. Our 2 grandchildren and their parents live in Japan, and our trans son and his wife live in Seattle. 3 years ago, on Thanksgiving Day, our grandson, Hayden Tsukasa, was born. Like me, and like his father and his sister, Emilia Yukina, Hayden got my mother's family name, Cameron, as a middle name. Like his father as a child, Hayden thinks that vehicles are some of the best things in the world. It's a natural interest for him to have. His grandfather in Japan drives a taxi. My brother-in-law was an auto mechanic. My father-in-law worked on airplanes in the Air Force. My mother's dad and 2 of her brothers had a business that sold trucks and farm implements, and my own dad grew up on a farm, learned to drive at an early age, and thought about becoming a stunt driver. Instead, he became a civil engineer, and my mom became a piano teacher and an amateur accompanist. My dad's mom also taught piano lessons, and Georgianne's mom worked as an accompanist on the way to becoming a nurse. Like my dad, and like my son Greg and me, my mother-in-law also learned to play the clarinet. Georgianne and I came to California when I enrolled as a CS student at Stanford. 2 days after our son Greg was born, I joined the Peninsula Symphonic Band, a Palo Alto adult school community band. Greg has often participated with me in the band. In this COVID-19 period, Greg and I have temporarily stepped away from the band, which had paused and now has started up again with special masks, instrument covers, and extra distance between a self-selected smaller group of musicians. There are 3 states where I attended elementary school and where I also had lived as a preschool child: California, Idaho, and Utah. All 3 deserve to be counted as my home state, but I never really had a hometown. My mom, on the other hand, moved to Rupert, Idaho when she was 8 years old and made it her hometown. For me, maybe my hometown was my family. The family farm where my dad lived was north of Paul, just a few miles away. He was 2 years ahead of my mom in school, but they went to the same high school and they had some of the same friends. My dad served for 2 years in the Army and became a supply sergeant at an anti-aircraft site in Illinois. In Oak Lawn, Illinois, my parents shared an apartment in this house with another couple. I was born in a military hospital a long drive north from Oak Lawn that used to exist at the Great Lakes Naval Training Base. From Illinois, we went to Logan, Utah, where my dad enrolled at Utah State University. We lived close to downtown, a few blocks southwest of the campus, always in the same house, but in 2 different apartments. We used to move to Rupert for the summer every year and return to Logan in the fall. When we eventually lived in Boise and later in North Ogden, we again would be close to my grandparents' home in Rupert, and when I eventually attended Brigham Young University in Provo before I transferred to Weber State in Ogden, I similarly would be close to my parents' home in North Ogden. After my dad graduated from Utah State, we moved to California. My dad worked as a civil engineer for the California Department of Water Resources, 2 years at their headquarters in Sacramento, and 1 year on a field assignment near Merced. Our garden in Sacramento had big, delicious strawberries, corn, and many other crops, and our neighbors in Merced let us pick their grapes that grew on our side of the fence. A nice thing about Merced was that it was close to Yosemite. After a year in Merced, we moved to Boise, Idaho, and my dad worked for the U.S. Forest Service. Between my 2nd and 3rd grade in school, we lived in a trailer at High Valley. I remember having a dog bite me as I rode a bicycle down a gravel road in High Valley, and I remember some happy times hiking near High Valley with my family. For the summer between my 3rd and 4th grade years, we moved the trailer to a national forest location across the road from the middle fork of the Payette River. My parents had a border collie Australian Shepherd mixed dog, and my mom could send him to get any of us by name. There were wild strawberries, a lot smaller than the domestic strawberries in Sacramento, and it took me 45 minutes to gather a small basket of them. On hot summer afternoons, while my dad was away at work, the rest of us sometimes would walk down to the river to cool off. From Boise, my dad was transferred to Price, Utah, where we stayed for 4 years, and then to Vernal, where we stayed for only a year. The Forest Service regional office was in Ogden, and 2 of the national forests were headquartered in Price and Vernal. At the time, our house in Price was at the very northeast corner of town. The view from the other side of the gravel road that ran behind us was open like this. I remember flying a kite from our backyard out over the landscape east of us. Price was the first place where I played clarinet in a school band. 2 attractions near Vernal were Flaming Gorge National Recreation Area and Dinosaur National Monument. After my 9th grade year, I played in a junior high summer band. Every week, before the local rodeo, the police would pull over all the cars that were traveling down the main road through town, and the occupants would become a captive audience for our rodeo parade. From Vernal, I went with my family to Ann Arbor, where the Forest Service sent my dad to study at the University of Michigan. There was some open space between Ann Arbor and Detroit, but Detroit wasn't far away, and the Canadian border also was nearby. On a trip through Canada, when my dad was asked where we were from, he had a driver's license from Utah, and our car had license plates from Michigan, but he confidently answered, Idaho. In Ann Arbor, we lived within walking distance of my high school and the Huron River. In an English class at Huron High, I started a sporadic hobby of making collages from magazine photos. I was a Weber State student when I made this one. I made this one as a present for my mom. For this one, after I had enough pictures to fill the whole surface, I think that I replaced almost everything. I made this collage more recently for an art contest for Iron Mountain employees in Mountain View that was planned but was never held. Michigan knew how to put on a beautiful display of fall colors. 3 years ago, a month before our grandson Hayden was born, Georgiana and I were in a choir that sang a song with lyrics expanded from Autumn Fires by Robert Louis Stevenson. a poem in his collection, A Child's Garden of Verses, about annual bonfires to burn fallen leaves, that is said to be about autumn bonfires as a metaphor for the changing colors of fall. From Ann Arbor, I moved with my family to North Ogden, Utah. We were there for my last 2 years of high school, and my parents still live there. One day, after I had moved away, a helicopter landed in the field where these houses and others now have been built. The pilot crossed the street, knocked on my parents' door, and asked my mom if she could tell him the way to Logan. She was able to show him how to get there on a relief map that was hanging on the wall. Our family's Old English sheepdog, Chaucer, loved helicopters and was thrilled to see that a helicopter had landed within sight and that the pilot himself had come to the door. Looking northwest from the other side of the street, there's a good view of the most important local landmark, Ben Lomond. I slept at the summit one night after backpacking southward from a trailhead near Willard Peak with my parents and my sisters. Georgianne also moved to Ogden near the end of high school. We didn't know it, but our homes were even closer to each other than my parents' homes in Idaho had been. Georgianne and I both had music scholarships at Weber State, where I majored in physics and math, and she majored in elementary education with a concentration in music. But she graduated before I transferred there from Brigham Young University. We were walking in a valley on the other side of the mountains when we first met each other. Now we often get to walk together along the Los Gatos Creek Trail near our apartment in San Jose. I recorded this final video on a phone early in the spring last year, before we knew about the impact that COVID-19 was going to have.